In the morning when you leave, I find myself in your bedroom, laying in your bed.
Hey, I'm Lola. I don't know if my mom told you, but she's in Florida this week, and I'm going to be filling in for her and
Oh,
cleaning the house for you.
yeah, you know what? She did mention something about that. Okay, well, just, if you need anything, cleaning supplies down there, just let me
Okay,
know.
yeah, she pretty much told me she starts in the kitchen and then, works her way
Yeah.
around. So, okay, I guess I'll get started then.
Okay.
Film unfolds as a quiet, carefully paced meditation on proximity, care, and the subtle emotional shifts that occur when two women are allowed to exist in shared domestic space without immediate narrative pressure to define or justify their connection. And in this sense, it resists spectacle from its opening moments, presenting Lola not as an intruder or catalyst, but as a presence shaped by inherited labor, responsibility, and gentleness, stepping into a role her mother has long occupied and carrying with her both the weight of expectation and the tentative hope of being seen as more than a temporary replacement. While Darla, positioned as the lady of the house, is introduced not through authority or dominance, but through mild distraction and emotional distance. A woman accustomed to delegating care, yet quietly unaccustomed to receiving it in ways that feel personal rather than functional. And this imbalance establishes the film's central tension not as overt conflict, but as an emotional asymmetry that gradually softens through routine, repetition, and attention. The dialogue's sparseness is not emptiness, but restraint, allowing pauses, acknowledgments, and mundane exchanges to carry meaning that queer audiences, particularly lesbian women, may recognize as the coded language of early recognition, where interest and admiration must pass as politeness, professionalism, or gratitude in order to remain safe, legible, and unremarkable to the outside world. And the film's refusal to rush these moments mirrors the lived experience of many women whose feelings for other women emerge slowly, shaped by context and proximity rather than dramatic revelation. Lola's attentiveness to her tasks, her desire to do well, and her eagerness for affirmation speak not only to youth or diligence, but to a deeper longing for validation that resonates with queer women who have learned to seek approval through usefulness, emotional labor, and quiet competence, often mistaking the warmth of being needed for the vulnerability of being wanted. While Darla's gradual softening, her gratitude, and her decision to exchange contact information are framed not as flirtation but as an opening, a small act of recognition that carries disproportionate emotional weight because it is offered freely rather than required. And in this way, the film captures how lesbian intimacy often develops through gestures that appear inconsequential to others but feel seismic to those involved. The domestic setting itself becomes symbolic, reflecting how women's relationships are frequently contained within private, feminized spaces that are socially dismissed as apolitical or unimportant. Yet it is precisely within these spaces that many queer women first encounter themselves, negotiating boundaries between care and desire, obligation and choice, safety and honesty. And the film's focus on housekeeping is not incidental but critical, highlighting how intimacy can grow through shared responsibility, attentiveness rather than overt declaration. For lesbian viewers, Lola's attraction to Darla may echo familiar experiences of admiration toward older women, mentors, or figures of authority, feelings that are often rationalized as respect or aspiration because acknowledging their emotional depth risks social disruption or internal confusion. And the film neither condemns nor sensationalizes this dynamic, instead presenting it as ethically complex and emotionally grounded, attentive to power imbalances without reducing the relationship to exploitation or fantasy. Darla's role, meanwhile, reflects the quiet isolation many women experience once they are positioned as caretakers or managers of households and families, expected to function smoothly while suppressing their own needs. And her responsiveness to Lola's presence suggests not predation but relief, a recognition of being seen as a person rather than a role, which broadens the film's appeal beyond queer audiences to women who recognize the exhaustion of constant responsibility and the hunger for uncomplicated connection. The restrained tone challenges a cultural landscape that often treats women's intimacy either as invisible or as spectacle, refusing both erasure and exaggeration by insisting that women's emotional lives deserve seriousness and nuance. And this insistence becomes quietly political in a society that remains uneasy with women loving women. Unless that love can be safely categorized, dismissed, or consumed, the discomfort persists, because women's love for each other threatens established hierarchies that rely on women's emotional labor being directed toward men, families, or institutions, rather than toward mutual recognition and fulfillment. And by depicting a connection that exists primarily in glances, gratitude, and unresolved possibility, the film exposes how threatening even restrained intimacy can be when it is not framed for external approval. Throughout the narrative, both Lola and Darla engage in careful boundary setting that reflects real-world pressures on queer women to remain respectable and non-disruptive, to monitor their feelings closely, and to translate desire into acceptable forms. And the exchange of a phone number becomes emblematic of this negotiation, a gesture that can plausibly signify practicality while quietly holding the promise of continued connection, illustrating how queer women often communicate through ambiguity not because they lack clarity, but because clarity is rarely safe. The film's pacing allows viewers to sit with this ambiguity rather than resolve it, honoring the reality that many lesbian experiences are defined not by dramatic consummation, but by extended periods of longing, restraint, and self-questioning, which can be both painful and formative. For women broadly, the story speaks to the tension between duty and desire, the fear of vulnerability, and the cost of emotional suppression, revealing how social conditioning encourages women to prioritize stability and care for others at the expense of their own authenticity, and how moments of connection can feel both exhilarating and destabilizing because they challenge deeply ingrained survival strategies. By centering women's interior lives and refusing to provide easy answers, the film positions itself as a serious cultural text that values emotional truth over narrative payoff, suggesting that visibility is not always about declaration, but about allowing oneself to recognize what is already present. The final moments, understated and unresolved, reinforce the idea that becoming visible is an ongoing process rather than a single event, one that requires patience, courage, and a willingness to sit with uncertainty. And in doing so, the film offers lesbian and queer women a mirror that reflects not fantasy or taboo, but the quiet resilience of their emotional lives, affirming that their experiences of connection, care, and longing are neither trivial nor transgressive, but deeply human, worthy of attention, respect, and thoughtful representation. And by inviting audiences to witness these dynamics without judgment or intrusion, the film ultimately asserts that women's love for women does not need to be defended through provocation or spectacle, because its power lies in its sincerity, its restraint, and its insistence on being seen on its own terms. The